A young boy named Hugo discovers that he has amazing powers, and as he sets out on a mission to find his real family,
The message. Go find the message.
he is faced with great danger.
The Wakfu series has taken France by storm and has become a cult hit elsewhere around the world. Initially, Wakfu was a tactical turn-based MMORPG developed by Ankama Games, which began development in 2006 and staggeringly didn't release until 2012. Ankama must have had insane faith in the series because on October 30, 2008, the animated show began airing. While Wakfu Mania was taking over France, the rest of the world was mostly oblivious. That is, until 2014, when a Kickstarter campaign to produce an English language dub was launched. The campaign was successful and Wakfu eventually found itself on Netflix, where it has been exposed to a mammoth audience. Despite its cult status, I had never heard of it until I randomly came across it once while browsing Netflix. Because of this, I'm jumping into the series blind without any outside opinions to influence how I view it. So let's go see what France has fallen in love with. I went into Wakfu with high hopes. It seemed like a fun adventure show that had similarities to shows like Dragon Ball Z. Furthermore, it attempts to be a love letter to RPGs, which should be right up my alley. However, after watching just a few episodes, I could tell this show wasn't for me. The first thing that caught me off guard here was the animation. Yes, the show is made with Flash, but just because something is animated in Flash doesn't mean it's automatically going to be terrible. On the contrary, I actually think some of the backgrounds and landscapes look absolutely phenomenal here, some of the best animation I have seen in Flash ever. The real problem with the animation is the characters. In close-ups and a few other situations, the characters look great, but as soon as they zoom out and show most of the character, it just looks plain terrible. When zoomed out, they all end up looking like something straight out of a Newgrounds animation, and to me, it was distractingly bad. I feel like I would have been way less distracted and bothered by it if the animation was consistently at the same quality, but instead it fluctuates and varies wildly, and that's incredibly off-putting to me. The story of Wakfu follows Hugo, a young boy who was orphaned as a child and given to an adoptive parent, who has now discovered that they have a special power. Sound familiar? It should, because it's become one of the most cliche ways to kickstart a story like this. Generally, when a story starts like this, the character will take time to discover and learn and eventually master their powers. However, Hugo is apparently a prodigy because about 20 minutes into the show, he's pretty much mastered his teleportation powers despite never having done it previously and having absolutely no training. He just starts doing these elaborate hand movements and pulling off moves somehow, and this development is just completely hand-waved by the show. This brings me to my next big gripe with Wakfu. The writing is just no good. I get that this is supposed to be a homage to RPGs, but they surely didn't deliberately write the dialogue like it's an NES or SNES RPG, right? The dialogue just feels so unnatural and it never flows right. They also try desperately to infuse as much comedy into the show as possible, but these attempts are downright terrible. A good example of their terrible humour and writing is with the character Rule. We learn very early on that Rule loves hoarding money and hates spending it. That's cool, you can definitely get some interesting plot points and jokes out of that. Except, the writers bash you over the head with it every single episode, to the point where it's basically his only character trait. I'm not even joking or exaggerating when I say there's roughly 3 to 5 money jokes about Rule in every episode, and none of them are very good. They do the same thing with the character Sir Percival, whose one defining trait seems to be that he wants to fight everything. It's never a good sign when your characters' personalities are as bland as their designs. Similarly, they completely miss the mark every time they try to inject the show with emotion and make you feel for the characters. Yugo's dad becomes trapped in moss in episode 2, and this is supposed to be a big emotional moment. However, everything develops at a breakneck pace here, and it turns into a non-event. It's like the writers wanted to see if they could move the story at a world record pace, because when Yugo's dad tells him that he's adopted and has these special powers, it all happens in a blink and you'll miss it moment. Even worse is that when Hugo sets out to find his real family, they have the audacity to not even show them saying goodbye to each other. All of the story beats in this show are just cliches taken straight from RPGs. Like the use of flash animation, this doesn't have to be a negative quality, but the writers do nothing of interest with it or even put a new spin on the cliches, so it just comes across as lazy. The main example of this is how quickly Yugo assembles his party. By the end of the first episode, there's a party of 5, which means we've just been introduced to 5 main characters, all inside 20 minutes. There are huge common problems with storytelling in a lot of RPGs, and Wakfu just drags all of those across into a brand new medium. But definitely the best part about them structuring it like an RPG is that they even include bullshit side quests as filler. Yugo's only ability for the first 75% of the season is that he basically has the gun from Portal, which makes it very confusing how he manages to take down these huge monsters on his own most of the time. His powers don't seem to give him super strength or anything like that other than the ability to make portals, so seeing him take down things that really should kill him is a little silly. When you arrive at the last 25% of the story where Yugo starts learning more about his powers, the narrative just becomes so nonsensical that it's a chore to follow along. It was somewhere around episode 16 where I just lost all motivation to keep watching this show, and it honestly felt like it dragged on forever. Linking back to the writers' inability to get emotional moments right, they certainly aren't helped out by the voice actors. I honestly don't think I have ever felt less attachment to a set of characters in a narrative-driven show before, and a big cause of that is because every time there was an important emotional moment, the actors just sounded wrong. Instead of drawing me in and making me invested in the scene, they just sound like they were reading off a piece of paper for the very first time, with absolutely no context to how the characters should be feeling. The thing that really sent me over the edge was the 3-part episode where all they did was play some shitty made up sport. Seriously, it's purely included just to kill some time in the season. They spend a whole freaking hour just playing this one game. It's not like it's multiple games of this dumb sport, it's just one game. You could watch almost an entire soccer game in that time. The worst part is they spend the last 5 minutes of episode 1 introducing all the players in the game, but then spend the first 5 minutes of the next episode doing the exact same thing. Who enjoys this? What is wrong with France? I honestly feel like I must be taking crazy pills because I can't find a single opinion on the internet that agrees with me that this show is terrible. To top everything off, there are a few glaring mistakes in the animation. The first I want to mention comes in the second episode, where a woman is warning Yugo about the dangers of the Forbidden Forest. This is supposed to be a serious lecture about how dangerous it is, yet her facial expressions would make it seem like everything is fine and dandy. Arguably worse is in episode 5, where a guy's mouth is moving and is clearly supposed to be talking, but not a single sound is made. To be perfectly honest, these mistakes made me laugh more than any of the show's poor attempts at humour did. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, this show is horrendous. Apart from the background and environmental art looking amazing at times, this show has nothing going for it. The characters are bland, the writing is ridiculously weak, and the voice acting tries to be even worse. I wasn't sure that I'd find one, but this is a show that I dislike more than Mobile Suit Gundam Seed. This show is so bad that I'm introducing an Animation Abomination Award for shows that are truly terrible that I review here on Cartoon Fridays.